Okay, so we are here today with my very first podcast guest, Laura Jessica Walker. Laura is a happy coach from England, and we're very excited just to learn more about what she does and find out exactly what a happy coach is. So, Laura, thank you so much for being on the show.
I'm absolutely delighted to be here with you.
Great. So, I read a little bit about your bio, and it sounds like you are a former co-founder and CEO of a very successful business. And so, as you were growing that business and making it successful, it took a toll on your, kind of your mental health, and you dealt with a lot of stress and everything. So you've made some great changes, and we'll talk more about that. But can you just tell me, what is a happy coach? I think a lot of people would like to know that.
Yeah, it's great, isn't it? I don't know if I made it up, but essentially a happy coach is, and it's really interesting how I introduce myself in terms of who I'm speaking to. So I either use the term happy coach or I use burnout coach, just depending. And to me, a happy coach is helping people to find their joy and live aligned to that. So in terms of how I work, it's like I'm opening this book of who is this person, what is it that brings them absolute joy, and then helping them to get to it. Because I think we lose that, as certainly as we go through life and we have different roles, don't we, as parents and as whatever we are, employers or employees, or we have all these roles: taxi driver, nurse, all those things that, carer of parents also as we get older. And it's sometimes we just lose who we are. And so for me, happy coach kind of embodied that. And it also really makes people smile when I say, hello, I'm Laura and I'm a happy coach. Some people think I might be a clown or something.
No, that's yeah. And when I hear happy coach, it also makes me feel, I want to know this person. I want to learn how to be happier. So it instantly resonates with you. So you do help people to kind of discover what makes them happy, because I feel like a lot of times we kind of, like you said, we forget our own happiness. We kind of prioritize other things, and then we realize down the road that we have been neglecting the things that make us light up inside. So what are some ways that you help people to explore and discover what brings them joy?
So I think one of the things that I really notice is that I work a lot with people who are heart-led. So they're in business, but their business isn't necessarily all about the bottom line. Their business is about creating change. And that's my background as well, as having started a social enterprise. And what I found was that people who are heart-led very often neglect themselves. So that's kind of what happens. And then and then in neglecting themselves, they neglect to remember what it is that lights them up. So one of the ways that I will do that is get them to really think about their childhoods. And obviously not all childhoods were wonderful, that's for sure, but most of us have played as children, right? And really understood what it is to kind of lose yourself and lose time in just doing something purely for joy. So what I try and do with my clients is investigate that their smaller self, their inner child, if you like. What was it that you did as a child? What did you spend hours doing? And although it's not a case of immediately saying, okay, so you liked skateboarding, so I tell you what, we'll start skateboarding again. It's not really about that. It's more about getting in touch with that feeling of what that felt like to be completely lost in a place of play. And then we'll start having a conversation about, what are you curious about? I think curiosity is such an important part of being human. And if we're not being curious, if we're not exploring different things and playing, then there's a big bit missing, I think.
Yeah, I think that sounds about right. I see it a lot with people, and to tie that to burnout, since you're also a burnout coach, come on. So what are some signs that you often see with people who are experiencing burnout, even if they don't necessarily recognize it in themselves yet? But what are some common signs that you see of burnout?
Yeah, so things like being snappy, so being very quick to maybe shout at the children if they've got kids or partners or whatever, or colleagues even. Not being able to that overwhelm where they don't feel like they're getting anything done. So what tends to happen is they're trying to do 6 or 7 or maybe more different tasks, and so what they end up doing is trying to do all of them. And when we do that, we only take a project to the point where it gets difficult. So it's like you've got loads of things on your list to do, and then you'll get as far as, oh, this is a bit hard now, I'm going to pick up the other thing. So what happens is that you're doing lots and lots of different things. So you feel incredibly busy, but you're not getting anywhere really. So there's that feeling of not being productive, and that's what I hear a lot is I'm really unproductive, I'm being snappy with the people that I love. A lot of people say, like, I'm not really liking myself at the moment, I don't like the person that I've become. All of that to me is these alarm bells ringing, like these red flags are going up, because they're all indicators of burnout. Obviously feeling exhausted, so waking up in the morning and feeling like you've already done a day's work before you even get to your desk is another thing. And I mean, there's lots, but some of them is sort of feeling really not passionate about what you're doing, even though you might be working in a space that you're really passionate about. You just don't feel passionate about your work anymore.
Okay. I can recognize in myself those things at different times in my life, especially the part about feeling unproductive and feel like you're doing a lot of things, but it's not really moving you forward.
Yeah.
So I can definitely I can definitely recognize some of those things in myself and others that I've known as well.
Yeah. Yeah,
Uh,
me too. And I think I recognize that in myself as well. And particularly having been through like a major burnout, I'm really astute at knowing when I need to slow down myself as well.
Sure. And that's a good lead into, actually, because you experienced your own sort of burnout during your experience. So can you kind of talk about how that was for you and how it led you into this path?
Yeah, I'd love to. I'm really happy to share my experience, because actually what I've learned is that when I talk about my experience, that's when people say, oh my goodness, okay, I need to do something. Because so just to kind of give you the picture, at the time I was co-founder of a organization which its aim was to help people with dementia to thrive. Okay, so and I started it at my kitchen table with my sister-in-law. It was like one of those, business built right from the ground up. And it was really, really difficult. It was difficult to get funding. It was difficult to, the actual work was easy, but actually finding the funding to be able to provide what we knew in our hearts was needed actually took a huge amount out of both of us. And we decided in our infinite wisdom to open a cafe in a city centre cafe. Now, we were both nurses, okay? So just to kind of give you the background, neither of us knew anything about even how to use a coffee machine. And we decided, because there was some funding available for social enterprises, that we would open this cafe in the city centre in Plymouth, in Cornwall, and in Devon. And we knew nothing about it, and we went straight in. We signed a lease for this massive building. We had no idea how we were going to pay for it, and it was like this old shop, and we had to have it completely, we had the builders in, and we had to make a kitchen and make this amazing space. But we had this vision, and the vision pulled us through, that we wanted this space where people could come and get support and have a cup of tea and lovely cake, and upstairs they could get everything that they needed in terms of support for dementia. And it was the vision that pulled us through. But my goodness, did it take everything of me. So once the cafe was open and it was a real success, and it was like everyone celebrating and going, oh my goodness, this is amazing, you've done this, we won awards for it, we went and did talks about it up and down the country. And I realized that I was totally burnt out, that it had taken everything of me, because it seemed like we just kept hitting walls, and then we had to find solutions. We had to chase money. There was one point where we owed the builders so much money, and I just didn't know where we were going to get it from. So I was awake all night worrying about it, just the thing that it taught me is that everything will always be okay, right? So and it was, and we managed to find the money at the last hour. We managed to find the money, but my goodness, did it take it out of me. And actually, so when my burnout hit, if you'd have asked me the day before, I would have said to you, I'm fine. I really would. And I believed that I was fine. I woke up in the middle of the night with a panic attack, which was so frightening. I thought I was having a stroke. I thought something terrible was wrong. And then it dawned on me that it was a panic attack. And that was the first of hundreds and hundreds of panic attacks and clinical depression. It all hit me all at once. And it was an awful experience. But the thing that I take through and the thing that I tell people is I did not see that coming. I didn't see it coming. Now, in hindsight, it's really easy to say, okay, yeah, you had a lot on your plate, Laura. And I was, pushing forward on a business, I had kids as well. I was juggling so much. And people were saying to me, do you think you've taken on too much? And there's some sort of, I don't know, inner hero in you that thinks you could just keep going. And because you keep going, you get this feedback loop of, it seems to me like I'm really resilient. Look, I'm doing all of this, which is, at that point, my body was in decline and my brain was certainly in decline, but I didn't know. I was living completely on adrenaline. And I was completely in the fight or flight, probably for a year. And I don't think I got out of it. And it takes its toll. And suddenly your body and your brain go, enough, that's enough. You can't do it anymore. And and so I had to stop work. I had to stop and step out of my business for about 6 months while I recovered. And it was the biggest lesson of my whole entire life. And I learned so much from it, which is why I'm now a burnout coach, because I come from a mental health background. I've read all the books, but I hadn't done the burnout. I hadn't done the clinical depression. And now I put the two together and it gives me this amazing resource, because I don't want people to go through that. It was horrendous.
Sure.
And we can do something about it.
Yeah. So it took a kind of a disaster situation to make you realize how burned out you actually were.
Yeah.
And I've seen that on your Facebook group, and sometimes you can share I think it's like a quiz where people can take it and it kind of points out how actually, burned out they are. So you're trying to put it in front of their face and just say, take this quiz and let's see how burned out you actually are, just to, we can at least prevent it ahead of time or deal with it now if you are in the middle of.
Yeah, that's my passion. It takes 3 minutes to do that quiz. And it's pretty accurate in terms of looking at how you're living at the moment. Is it, are you preventing a burnout or are you heading towards one? But I'd still find it really interesting when I have clients or potential clients really who do that quiz and still carry on, and they're like, oh no, I haven't got time. That's what I hear again and again. I don't have time to see a coach. I don't have time to put in strategies to help me. And it makes my heart sink when I hear that, because I know that if you just take, even if you can just do 5 minutes a day, that's what I say to people, 5 minutes a day on yourself, and get into the habit of that, it can make such a massive difference.
Sure. And it's funny, I hear the same thing as a sleep coach. I hear people, they talk about how their sleep is so bad, they'd like to sleep better, but they don't have time to work with a coach. And it's like, well, if you don't make a little bit of time to work on improving things, then this is just gonna drag on forever. So even though sometimes it seems like time is just the hardest thing in the world to find, I think, we need to make time for those things that will change our lives, basically.
Yeah, absolutely.
But we will, so we'll share the link to that quiz in the show notes, just so people can have access to that.
Brilliant, thank you.
Sure. Well, so we'll kind of relate this to sleep, since this is also a sleep related podcast too.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you mentioned when you were going through your own kind of burnout experience, you found yourself not being able to sleep during the night and waking up. And when you're working with a lot of your clients on, happiness and burnout, do you find that a lot of them bring sleep into the conversation, and kind of, what does that look like when people are talking.
Yeah, it absolutely does, which is kind of how we met in the first place, wasn't it? Because I reached out to you because it really is, and it's something that people talk about a lot, and no wonder, because if people are in fight or flight, they're not going to be sleeping. So yeah, a lot of people tell me that they can go to sleep okay, but then they might wake up in the middle of the night. Some people it's the other way around. It's that they just cannot get to sleep, and because they've got thoughts going on and on and on in their mind, and they just can't sleep. So yes, and it's really interesting because it isn't my expertise, Seth, which is why I'm really excited to kind of get to know you, because it's such a big part of burnout. It absolutely is. Yeah.
Sure. And as a sleep coach too, part of when people come to me, they're not sleeping because a lot of times they are stressed, they are burned out, they're not satisfied with the things in their life, their job is not serving them. And so, as a result of me working with them, sometimes we do have to make those changes and be like, okay, this thing is stressing you out. It's not making you happy. Maybe we need to look into that. So, with you, that's kind of a natural extension too, where okay, we're burned out, we're not happy. I know somebody who you can you can chat with. So it all works together. It's hard to sleep when
Yeah.
you're not happy, and it's hard, and when you're not happy, it's hard to sleep. Yeah, so it all works together.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's all combined, isn't it? It's that holistic way of looking, isn't it, at a person and the difficulties that they have. But yeah, generally it comes from one thing, doesn't it? And I'm really intrigued. The more that I work in burnout and the more that I start to take it apart, I'm really intrigued by the fact that we tend to have quite a simplistic view about what burnout is, that it's just, we're doing too much. But actually, there's so much more going on in that, isn't there? And, even if the sleep thing comes first, even if people are not sleeping particularly well, then that's going to have a knock-on effect about how they feel the next day, and how they turn up in life, and then that has an effect on their mood and all of those things. So yeah, it's all combined together, isn't it?
It's a big jumble. Yeah. In my line of work, I work with a lot of people who are kind of looking for a kind of a quick fix, like just a quick solution. And so a lot of people turn to sleeping pills. They're looking for just a medication to take this. So, do you notice that with a lot of people you work with, that they've kind of turned looking for a quick fix in terms of maybe it's alcohol or, or drugs or medication or something that's, they're just looking for something just to make them happy or forget about what they're unhappy about? And do you find a lot of that?
Yeah, I do. And I have had clients that are like currently that for example are using alcohol. Yeah, not so much sleeping pills necessarily, but certainly I'm seeing that sort of self-medication where they're they're removing themselves from the situation. So when you, for example, coming home from work and then pouring a glass of wine, and then that glass of wine becomes two or maybe three, and then that becomes just the normal, like I've got to have that to get through, to relax. So what they're actually doing is they're trying to sort of turn off that fight flight by using alcohol to suppress it. Yeah, and I see that a lot, and again in the work that I do, I teach them other ways to turn off fight flight, which is far healthier. But sometimes that's really difficult then, because then they've got a habit. We've got to then break that habit, and actually I don't really believe in breaking the habit. We have to find the source. What's the reason for it? So why are we drinking at 5 o'clock when we get home? Because because it becomes normalized, and it often becomes normalized in families as well. So where both the husband and wife, or the couple, whoever, are doing the same thing. It's like, yeah, no, I'll pour you a glass of wine, darling. You're obviously very stressed. So we have to unpick all of that very often.
Yeah. Okay. I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to hear you say that, because our philosophies are kind of the same about how a lot of times, habits or substances do become just a band-aid. We have this problem at the root of it, and we're just going to cover it up with a band-aid or try to sweep it under the rug. So it's really when you can get to that you start to see progress. So I'm sure your clients find that very
Yeah.
rewarding to work through that with you.
Yeah, it's interesting because I did have a client who came to me with that issue. This is really early on in my coaching, actually, and she came to me and she said, "Oh, like, I know that I'm drinking too much, so I just want to work on that with you. I just want to work." I was like, "Okay, well, I guess I can work as an accountability partner. We can work it out." And what I realized through that whole process is that really was a waste of time, because what we should have been doing is digging down into why.
Sure.
Because it's no good saying, right, we're going to reduce it by a glass, or we're going to, because we're not touching the problem at all. So I just wouldn't work like that anymore.
So when you do happen to work with people in other countries, have you noticed that certain countries seem to have more stress or burnout, just from what you've been able to, you know?
It's really interesting, this question, because do you know what? I'm seeing the same things no matter where anybody is living. They're experiencing the same things. And I do sort of feel like it's global now, isn't it? The way that we work is, and we're really seeing that. And I think from the pandemic as well, we're all just so much more connected and yet disconnected. There's both of those things going on. And I think with this connection, we are working all hours, aren't we? And we're all sort of pushing ourselves harder. And there's an analogy that I use that I find quite interesting, in that when the vacuum cleaner was invented, that you would think that when we get more and more technology, that we're sort of able to do less and have more time to ourselves, but it doesn't happen. And it didn't happen. Like, the vacuum cleaner was sort of one of the first, wasn't it? Bits of technology to help us clean our homes. And what actually happened was, you'd think, the housewife, as she traditionally was then, would have loads more time, and she could laze around, and because she's got a vacuum cleaner, so she doesn't have to use a broom anymore and get on her hands and knees. But what actually happened was that the standards of cleanliness went up overnight, because we could get our houses cleaner. So all we did then was create more work to reach this standard. And I just see that all the time in the way that we're working, and it's just not healthy.
Yeah.
I don't.
Speaking of that, I do see that a lot of times technology can present some challenges with sleep. A lot of times we're, on our devices later into the night. We are looking at stressful content on the devices, kind of just doing things that can make sleep more challenging. So in terms of, just affecting your happiness or your mood or things like that, kind of what do you see a lot of times with clients about, how is technology affecting their overall happiness levels?
It's in every day, isn't it? And every hour, people on their phones scrolling. I say people, myself as well. And it's that, the dopamine hit, isn't it? My son, my 17-year-old son, is really passionate about this, in terms of how he's seeing his peer group just constantly on screens. And it's not just their peer group, it's all of us. And you're right, and we've got news coming at us 24/7, and it's not good news, is it? It's designed to sort of get our attention and tell us how terrible everything is in the world. And well, I'd love for that to change. I'd love for there to be, for every bad news story, they have to tell a good one, because they're out there, aren't they? The good news stories are out there. And I know that from my work in dementia, as I said, helping people to thrive. One of the things that we would always do is do a news story at the beginning of our sessions. So I would seek out all the good news stories, and they are out there. So what I don't understand about technology is it could be so amazing in terms of making us all happy if we were fed all of this great news, like this new thing that's been invented, or something that's been discovered, or something that scientists have done, or an amazing achievement that somebody has done. That could be coming into us 24/7, and we'd feel really, really different about spending time on our phone. But of course, we're hardwired as humans to look for the fearful things, and that's where we get that hit, that feeling of, oh, this is interesting. I don't know how you change that, because that's human design as well as well as technology, and you put the two together, and it just seems to be, I don't know, it just seems to be so negative. So that's what I see. And also clients that I work with that very often get sucked into the Facebook feed, and they have to comment, and then they find themselves in this whole negative loop of of commenting and then checking the comments and then getting really angry about it. So I do a lot of work around teasing people off these platforms and using them in a different way. So I believe that we can use these things in a way that can be really positive. So like, for example, Facebook has some amazing communities that you can tap into, and there are positive spaces in there. But if we just passively take things that are thrown at us, then it's not very good for us.
Sure. No, I completely agree with that. If you would like to start up your own social network, I'll join, just based on positivity.
And people have tried, haven't they? I think, you know, you're seeing that people are trying to do it, but these big giants have got it, haven't they?
They do.
And you know, that's a really tricky one.
They have narrowed down on how people work and what attracts them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I usually, sometimes I'll tell people about the studies they've done where obviously, like for a lot of people, our phones are the first thing we see in the morning, the last thing we see before we go to bed. A lot of times we are looking at that negative content. And I think I read that if you expose yourself to negative news or something like that, it can put you in a negative mood for like 4 to 6 hours afterward. So it just
Wow.
lasts for a long time. So sometimes I educate people about that. And then also just, you know, it seems like it's so hard to focus these days. And when you have all these alerts and emails and things like that, I've read that it takes you like 20 or 25 minutes to refocus after you're interrupted by something. So if you're being interrupted every, 1 minute by your phone, like how are we ever supposed to focus and, be present? So I think when you have those forces pulling at us, it's easy to kind of slip into that negativity and feel distracted, and we lose that productivity we were talking about because we're unfocused. And yeah, it's a tough web to untangle.
Yeah, it's kind of like we lose control of our own day, don't we? We sort of give it away.
We just give our attention to those devices. So, because, as we coaches, I think a lot of us try to practice what we preach. So what are some things that you've, implemented in your own life that kind of bring you joy or happiness that that have helped to put you in a better place?
So one of the things that I work with my clients with is to have 3 non-negotiables that they do every day. And I think any more than 3 is too much. We sometimes we're doing really well and we could probably have 7 or 8 non-negotiables and it'd be great, but then we will hit a week that's like not as great. So I always stick to 3 because 3 works. I've tried it. And so I have 3 as well, and I change them. So they're not always the same because I tend to get a bit bored. But one of them that generally never changes is the water. So drinking 3 liters of water a day. I don't know what that is in pints, maybe 5 pints of water. I think it's around there.
I would have to get a conversion calculator.
But yeah, so something around that. So 3 liters of water a day, and that it's such a simple thing to do, and it makes such an amazing difference. Now, I used to be terrible at drinking water. I don't think I ever felt thirsty, not unless I was really, really, really dehydrated. And drinking water has completely changed how I turn up in the world, because when your brain's hydrated, you're on fire. You can you can focus on things, not to mention your skin's amazing, you feel better, you're much, much healthier because you're having water. So that's one of the things that I always say. It's such a simple thing, because actually it doesn't take any more time. You just have water on your desk or wherever you are, or you carry water around with you. So it's a really easy one. So I do that because I have to practice what I preach, because I go on about water so much. So water's one. Moving in some way. So for me, it's yoga. I absolutely love yoga. So I do yoga, not every day though, I have to admit. So I will do some stretches on the days that I'm not doing yoga. So I might do some sun salutations or something. But I do like a proper yoga program every 3 days. Sorry, 3 times a week. And then, I'm just going to stick to 3 because otherwise I'm going to confuse you, because I just realized I had more than 3. And the other one is getting in cold water.
Okay.
So I absolutely love getting in cold. Well, I do. Sometimes I don't love it. Sometimes I don't want to do it at all. And I think that's the whole point, is that do the thing that you don't want to do, because it's good for you. And actually you're then practicing your sort of your mindset and practicing your I've forgotten the word. but yeah, practicing doing the thing that you don't want to do is it helps you with focus, basically. So yeah, but anybody can have any three. You can pick three that you want to do, because you've got to want to do it as well. I think that's the other thing. Even though I don't want to go in the water all the time, I do really want to do. I want to achieve that. So
yeah, the cold water thing is something that I've heard so much about the benefits. I've never been able to actually get myself to do it, but I'm gonna give it a try. So what have you noticed for yourself? What benefits have you seen from, doing the cold water?
With the cold water, well, I think, and I've come to this really late, right? So what am I, 46 years old, and bearing in mind that, as I said, I used to live in Cyprus, in this little island which was in the Mediterranean and really hot, and I could have swum every single day, and I didn't when I was younger. So, and now I've got a freezing cold Atlantic Sea. I've chosen to do that. So I've only been doing it for the last 2 years, but it becomes quite addictive, I think. And the first time that I did it, I started on New Year's Day. So on the 1st of January, it was absolutely freezing. And I started off just dipping my shoulders under it and then coming out. I didn't swim. I just got wet and then came out again. And what I noticed is that my skin the whole of my body was just tingling, this amazing feeling of being alive. And from that moment, I was like, I'm going to do it again. I'm going to do it again. And now, now I'm swimming around. I'm not a great swimmer. I sort of bob around in the water. And I always go with someone else. That's really important as well, so you don't go on your own. But yes, and I feel so much more awake. I feel much more, I just feel so happy. It just makes you happy. That I think that's the only thing I can say. It becomes addictive. And there's just where I live, if you'd have gone swimming 5 years ago, it would have been really rare in the winter to see someone else. But since the pandemic, when the swimming pools were shut, more and more people went in the sea, and now it's really busy, and it's all middle-aged women like me.
Okay, well, I think that you've convinced me to give cold water a try. So
I think you should try it, Seth. I think you will love it.
yeah, as I mentioned, we don't have a lot of water here in Colorado, so I might have to just use the bathtub or the.
You'll have to get a bath and put some ice in it.
Okay. All right, I'll let you know how it goes. I'm a little scared.
Okay.
We'll give it a try.
I'm going to hold you accountable to that.
Need that. Okay. Let's see. So I guess going back to sleep and kind of tying it together with your happy coaching, do you have a tip you can think of that might be helpful, both to help people increase their happiness a little bit, but also that could be useful for possibly improving their sleep as well? Do you have a tip that kind of might tie into both worlds?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I've got a few, and I think it's got to be about moving, hasn't it? We've got to move our bodies and exercise, and it's just so important. And I know that we hear that all the time, and it's like, I know, but it just works, doesn't it? Just moving your body, whether that's running or yoga, or there's so many different ways that we can move our body. Dancing, oh my goodness, how wonderful is dancing? That's the one, because that makes you really incredibly happy, putting on some amazing music. And I've got a friend who's a fellow coach. I love her dearly, and she hula hoops every day. So she puts music on and then she's like hula hooping, and I love that idea as well. So there you go, there's moving your body and getting happy at the same time.
Okay, I like that. I like how you tie that together. And yeah, just scientifically, I mean, they've shown that movement does help with sleep because it releases the endorphins. So so it increases your mood. It helps with stress relief. It helps your body temperature to regulate itself so that you're more prepared for sleep at night. What else? Yeah, there's just there's so many benefits to movement that it can only benefit you, both in terms of making you feel good and also your sleep as well. So that's I like that tip.
And with my hat for my dementia hat, because obviously I've had a career working in that also, there's a lot of evidence, a lot of scientific evidence to show that if we're moving our bodies every day, then we're less likely to develop a dementia later on as well. So there's so many benefits, aren't there?
Yeah, I could probably spend a whole podcast on talking about that.
Yeah.
So So we've talked about what you do, and so what's next for you? What are you working on that you're excited about? What new things are you looking at? What are you excited about?
Yeah, well, as I said, I'm kind of new to doing this full time. I've coached since I was about 20. So it's a long time ago. So because I started off as a mental health nurse, and part of that was a coaching course, and I just loved it. So, and I never wanted to drop it. So I've always coached in different capacities. So this is full-time coaching from July, which I am absolutely loving. I'm so excited about getting the lifestyle that I've always wanted. So I worked ridiculous hours in my last company, and I've handed that over now to my sister-in-law who I co-founded it with, and that's going great guns. It's lovely to step away from something that's been successful, so that feels really good. And that allowed me to break through so many of the things that I wanted to do in life. So now it's almost like I'm going back to, I love working one-to-one. I love working in small groups. So I will continue to do that and to develop that. I've started a podcast with my son, which has just been delightful. And it wasn't on the cards. It wasn't something that was like, this is what I want to do. It just came out of, we'd been creating some reels together when it was, I'm on Instagram, and I noticed that every time that he joined me on a reel, we got ridiculous amount of views, like 17,000 people watching. So we both like looked at each other and said, there's something in our relationship, or there's something that people want to see. So we thought we'd try a podcast, and and so we released one last week, and we've been just bowled over by the comments, and it's because we talk about his neurodiversity and mental health and positive mindset, and so that is something that I'm really excited at taking forward to, because I don't know where it's going to take us, but it's just a really wonderful thing. So I will keep doing my coaching, and but I've got no big dreams now, because I've done that. I've built the business, and I've employed the staff, and I've done all that stuff. So now for me, this next part of my life is to be able to work from anywhere, because I work, and that's why I stick to working on Zoom, so I can work for anywhere in the world. The potential of travel, I'd love to do some traveling. I'd love to come to the States and see, there's so many places in the world that I'd love to see. So I guess that's it. That's the thing that I'm looking for in the horizon, is getting the lifestyle right.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on reaching this stage after so much hard work, and finally, kind of being at that place, like you said, where just you have so many different options available. You really can't pursue what kind of makes you happy, what fits into your lifestyle, more of what you want. And that's a good place to be. And the podcast with your son, it sounds like just a fun thing to do too. Like,
it's just been so funny. We've spent such a lot of time laughing, and if that's all that comes out of that project, then it's nailed it for me, because it's just been wonderful.
Okay, cool. I can't wait to listen to the first episode of that. So what are, if people want to work with you and they want to, become happier and relieve burnout and kind of reach a better place, how can people work with you? What's the best way for people to connect with you?
So you can follow me on pretty much all the platforms. I'm Laura Jessica Walker everywhere. So on Instagram, which is it's probably sort of my main place, is Instagram and Facebook. I have a Facebook group as well called Sustainable Leadership. So if you are a business owner who is led by their heart, then that's your place. Get in there. That's a place for you to be. We just have lots of fun in there. I ask lots of poignant questions. I go live every week as well. So I'll come up with some top tips and interview wonderful people like you, Seth, who you're going to be coming on one of my happy chats as well. So that's really wonderful. Yeah, so that's where you find me, Laura Jessica Walker, and it's laurajessicawalker.com as well, I think. Yes, I think. Yes.
Okay, great. And I will include links to all of those so that people can find that information and connect with you if they could use it.
Brilliant. And do the burnout quiz. That's the other thing. That's your call to action. Do that burnout quiz and see how close you are to burnout. I think, because that's a free quiz. It takes 3 minutes.
Yes. Okay. I recommend that everybody should take that just to see where they're at.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you so much for taking the time to be here. I'm fascinated by learning more about happiness, happy coach, and I think it fits right in with what I do. So definitely, I think that I think there's definitely room for us to team up and make people happier and more well rested.
I'd love that. Yeah.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you so much, and hope you have a good rest of the day.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.